All right, Bib 1001. Today we are working with wisdom literature. The wisdom literature that we're focusing on is Proverbs and then Job and Ecclesiastes. But before talking a lot about Job and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, I want to talk about wisdom literature in general and wisdom in general. And so one of the best definitions that I've heard for wisdom is to basically be skill at living. So wisdom equals skill. Wisdom equals skill at life. When you think about the wise people that you know, what is it that makes you consider them wise? Well, they're skilled at living. And so what does that mean to be skilled at living? Basically, you are skilled at decision making. So the person who is wise, the one who is skilled at life, they're good at life, they do life well because they've developed a skill at making decisions. And they make good decision upon good decision upon good decision. And so all wisdom literature from every culture is designed to help you do better at making decisions. And so this skill at decision making, skilled at life. Now, every culture has wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is not unique to the Old Testament. It's not unique to ancient Israel. That every culture has its wisdom literature. And oftentimes there is overlap between the cultures in terms of wisdom. Today we have wisdom literature. One of the places where I find wisdom literature kind of front and center is anytime I go through the checkout stand at Target or Smart and Final or someplace. Right there in front of me, all this wisdom literature designed to help me make better decisions about what I eat, better decisions about how I use my money, better decisions about my health, better decisions about relationships. It's all right there in front of you at the checkout stand, all of this literature to help me be a better decision maker that I can live a more fulfilled life. Okay, that's wisdom literature. You find it in commercials. You find if you buy this product, you'll be happier. Use our product. Make that decision to use our product and you'll have a better life. And so wisdom literature promises that if you practice it, if you make it part of your decision-making strategy, that you will have a better, happier, more complete life. So that's common for all wisdom literature, no matter what culture, no matter what age. So you're probably wondering, okay, well then what is it that makes Israel's wisdom literature different? What is it that makes it kind of unique or sets it apart from other types of wisdom literature? Well, it's pretty simple. For Israel, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. That's what sets Israel's wisdom literature apart from all the other wisdom of the ancient world. Now, beginning of wisdom, I think they're saying that that's the first decision you got to make, that you got to get that decision right before you can get any other decision right, before you can live a good life, a blessed life, a full life. You got to get this decision right. It's the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of the wise path of decision making. Okay, well, what is it? It's to fear the Lord. Now, this doesn't mean that you go through life scared to death of God. To fear the Lord is to give God God's due honor, the reverence that God is worthy of. It is basically to put God first. So if you make the decision to put God first in your life, and that every other decision is going to fall under that God first decision, then you're going to be skilled at decision making. You're going to live a good life. You're going to have good results. Okay, but if you get this decision wrong, so that instead of fearing the Lord, putting the Lord first in life, and say you put the Lord second, third, whatever, then you're setting yourself up for bad decision after bad decision. And so the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. You need to get that decision right. And if you don't get that decision right, then you're on the path of foolishness. But if you make this decision to fear the Lord, then that puts you on the path of wisdom. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Now, in terms of where was this stuff taught, how was this wisdom literature used? We think that it had two primary settings. We think that one setting would have been amongst the nobility, those who are being prepared for leadership, and that there were probably sages who taught wisdom to up-and-coming leadership. And you can see why you would have this, that your leaders need to make good decisions, because if they make bad decisions, it's not simply that they suffer, but the whole people suffer. Everyone that they're over, everyone that they represent, if they're foolish, if they make bad decisions, then it's the people who suffer the most. And so you train the nobility to become good decision makers. The second context for wisdom to be taught was the home. And so you would have parents teaching their children, grandparents or grandchildren, skill at making decisions. And so making use of wisdom literature to try to pass on skill so that the next generation will make good decisions. And it's not simply that you want each one to to have a happy life, a good life, as much as you want that, but you're also thinking about this in terms of the well-being of the family. That you want your children and grandchildren to make good decisions so that the family does well, that the family is strong, the family is stable, that the family is going to be in good standing generation after generation after generation. So you make use of wisdom literature to help your children become better decision makers so that the family is in a good place, a stable place. So wisdom literature designed to help make good decisions, to be skilled at life, skilled at living, and the foundational decision is to put God first. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And it's going to be used in homes, and it's going to be used in training future leadership so that they become good, wise decision makers. Okay, so hopefully you have that. Hopefully you're thinking about some of the wise people that you know. And when you go to someone for wisdom, you go to someone for advice, why do you go to that person? You probably go to that person because you've seen them make some good decisions. And so you trust them with, okay, I've seen you make good decisions. I'm at a decision point. I need some wisdom. You go to someone that's made good decisions. Okay, so that's wisdom. And now we're going to kind of track this out a little bit further. So oftentimes, wisdom is presented as really there's kind of two paths in life that you can take. So the first path is this path of wisdom. And that first decision that you have to make if you're going to walk the path of wisdom is that you are going to fear. You're going to fear the Lord. And of course, you know that that means you're going to put God first. Okay, in all your decisions, God is first. So then, what that's going to do is that's going to result in a life of good, decisions. That you got that foundational decision right, keeping God first. And so then all of your other decisions are going to line up with that, and you're going to always keep God first. You're going to live this life of good decision upon good decision upon good decision. The outcome of that is a good, blessed, the outcome of that is a good, blessed life. Well, what does a good, blessed life look like? Well, one, you have your health. Okay, you've taken care of yourself, and you haven't worked yourself too hard. Made sure you gotten enough sleep. You've eaten right. So you're going to be in good health. Second, you are going to have wealth. Okay, you're going to prosper. That you've made good use of your resources. You haven't been lazy, and so you're wealthy. You know, you're prospering. And then the third is that you have a family that will bring you honor. Okay, your marriage is going to be good. Your spouse is going to make you look good. You're going to have children who bring you praise. Your children will do such a great job in all the different things that they're involved in. The people are impressed with you, your parenting. And so your children actually bring you honor. Okay, so that's the good life. Good life, you got your health, you're prospering, your family brings you honor. And how did you get there? You made a whole lot of good decisions. Well, how is it that you were able to make all those good decisions? Well, you kept God first. Okay, and so you're living wisdom, wise life. Okay, the opposite path is the path of the fool. And so the fool, what makes the fool is that the fool has chosen to diss God. Okay, and so disrespected God. So now the Lord is second or last. And so in dissing God, and making God kind of second place or last place, and maybe that means you put yourself first, maybe that means you put something else first, but you diss God by not putting God first. You haven't feared the Lord. That's going to lead to bad decisions. And you'll make one bad decision on top of another, on top of another, on top of another. But what that's going to lead to is a wrecked, cursed life. Okay? Because you've made so many bad decisions, your life is going to end up in a wreck. And everybody's going to consider you cursed because your life is such a wreck. Well, what does that look like? I'm sure you can figure it out, that you are going to be sick, that you are going to be poor, and that your family will bring you shame. Hopefully you can see that over there in the corner. But that's going to be the outcome of it. That your life is wrecked, you are sick, you haven't taken care of yourself, poor habits, you are poor, you've squandered your resources, made bad decisions, been lazy, haven't worked hard and haven't worked smart. And then your family, you're going to have a marriage where your spouse just nags you, controls you, makes you miserable. And your children are going to bring shame upon you. They're going to squander your resources. They're going to be in trouble. They're going to make you look bad. And so, I mean, your life is a mess. Well, how did it get to be such a mess? Well, you made bad decisions. Bad decision upon bad decision upon bad decision. That's what led to such a wrecked life. Well, how did you end up making all those bad decisions? You diss God. If you don't put God first, then you're going to make bad decisions. The beginning of wisdom is the Lord first. And if you don't get the beginning right, then you end up in a mess. And so you diss God, you make bad decision upon bad decision, you end up with a wrecked, cursed life. Okay, and those are basically the two paths that you have to take. You're either going to walk this path of wisdom or walk this path of foolishness. And in Proverbs, one of the things that we see is that these two paths, and especially wisdom and foolishness, are personified. And so you have Lady Wisdom, and you have Dame Folly. And these two women are calling out and trying to entice you to listen to them, to follow their decision-making guidance, that they're both promising happy, good lives. But if you listen to Dame Folly, she'll deceive you, and her promises are empty, and you'll end up with a wrecked life. But if you listen to Lady Wisdom and you follow her instructions, then what you're going to discover is that even though her instructions might be challenging at times, you're going to end up with a good life and a blessed life and a complete life. And so listen to Lady Wisdom. Don't be deceived by Dame Folly. Okay, and that's basically how wisdom literature works. You have these two paths, and it's kind of, who are you going to listen to? You're going to listen to Lady Wisdom, or are you going to be deceived and follow the advice of Dame Folly? Now, let's talk a little bit about Proverbs. So the book of Proverbs is set up so that you have 9 chapters of father-son speeches. Okay, the first 9 chapters, a father speaking to his son or sons. And remember, it's a patriarchal world. And so the future of the family, so to speak, is in the hands of the son, the next generation. And so the fathers are trying to address their sons, encourage their sons to live wisely, to make good decisions upon good decisions. And so you have these father-son speeches. And let me just lay some out for you here. Let's go ahead and look at Proverbs chapter 3 for an example of one of these father-son speeches. So Proverbs chapter 3. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Okay, notice that if you follow through on the instructions of the Father, the result will be length of days, years of life, peace will be added to you. Okay, and so you can kind of see this good life in terms of long life and peace, health. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man, that honor part. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord. Put the Lord first and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will be bursting with wine. Okay, so I think you can probably catch that. I think you hear that if you honor God, keep God first with your wealth, then you're going to have more wealth. Okay, your barns are going to be overflowing. So the father is trying to teach his son, encourage his son that, look, whatever you do, keep God first. Okay, seek the Lord in all things and lean upon the Lord rather than your own understanding. And what you'll discover is that God will bless you with a good life, that you'll have your health, you'll have length of days, you'll have peace, and you'll prosper. Okay, and so all of that, happens over and over and over again, speech after speech from father to son. If we turn on a little bit further into Proverbs, we will see that you get down to chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9. You especially have this imagery of Lady Wisdom calling out, and then Dame Folly also calls out. So listen, chapter 9. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. Okay, and so you kind of get the picture that here you have Lady Wisdom. She's prepared her table. She's ready to provide for people, for simple ones. All they have to do is listen to her voice and come and learn from her and receive from her. And she'll direct their steps and they'll have a good life. And then you get Dame Folly. So down chapter 9, verse 13. The woman Folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town, calling to those who pass by who are going straight on their way. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. And so then Dame Folly, making the same types of promises. And yet, if you listen to her, you basically end up with a wrecked life. The dead are there. So again, patriarchal world, fathers concerned about not just their sons, but the future of the family. And so really calling on their sons to make sure that they listen to Lady Wisdom and that they avoid Dame Folly. And so as you read through those first 9 chapters, and you're thinking about father-son talks, father-son speeches, and you can see how the father would end up using, son, which woman are you going to listen to? You got 2 women that are calling you. Make sure that you listen to the woman that can actually direct your steps well, rather than deceive you into a disastrous life. Okay, first 9 chapters, Proverbs. Then the next big chunk of Proverbs, chapters 10 through 31, basically what we think of when we think of Proverbs, the short little sayings that are kind of easy to remember, kind of catchy, and they're not all connected one right after the other. It's not a narrative format. It's just kind of like a sayings book. And these are a bunch of sayings where if you practice these sayings, chances are you're going to make good decisions. Now, very important to get this. Wisdom literature as a whole, and Proverbs in particular, these are not guarantees as to how life is going to work. These are not promises. These are basically observations, God-inspired observations, but still observations about how life usually works. Okay, not guarantees, not promises that this is how life always works. Rather, observations that this is how life usually works. And so if you put these sayings into practice, kind of odds are that you are going to have a good life. Okay, so look, chapter 11, and we'll take a look at a few of these. First one we'll look at, chapter 11, verse 12. And I want you to picture, a parent talking to their son or daughter about this. So here's the saying, chapter 11, verse 12, Proverbs. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. Okay, whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. What are the parents trying to teach their child? See, I think that probably the point is that you don't want to belittle your neighbor. Why? Where does your neighbor live? Your neighbor lives right next to you. And so if you're bad talking your neighbor and your neighbor finds out about it, and they will, they have the ability to make life miserable for you. So instead of bad-mouthing them, belittling them, you're going to keep your mouth shut. You're not going to embarrass them. You're not going to trash talk them, because they can make life miserable for you. So you're just going to keep your mouth shut when it comes to your neighbor. Okay? Make sense? Okay, let me say it this way. You're living in the dorm. If you're talking bad or belittling the person that lives across the hall, good luck sleeping at night. They'll blast their stereo. They'll make life miserable for you. If you're going to talk bad about someone, belittle someone that lives on the other side of campus. At least you'll be able to get your rest. Okay, that's the whole thing. You can just see parents talking to kids about the playground. Don't talk bad about the person that sits next to you in class. Don't belittle them, because they can make your whole day miserable. Okay, next proverb. So we are going to go to Proverbs 11:17. So Proverbs 11:17. Listen to this one. Again, picture parents talking to their children. A man who is kind benefits himself, but a cruel man hurts himself. Okay, listen to it again. A man who is kind benefits himself, but a cruel man hurts himself. Okay, now you think about kindness, and that's an outward action. We're kind to others. But what the proverb is saying, when we treat others kindly, the person that we're actually benefiting, the person that we are being most kind to, is ourselves. And we also think about cruelty as being cruel to someone. It's an outward action. It's doing someone wrong, doing someone harshly. Okay, and what the proverb is saying, that when you treat others wrong, when you are harsh and cruel towards others, the one that you're actually being cruel to is yourself. See, you get it, I know you do, that if I bless people and I'm kind to people in my moment of need, they're going to bring that kindness back to me. And if I'm cruel to people in my moment of need, all those people that I've been cruel to, they're just going to laugh at me. I'm finally getting what's coming to me. And so you can picture parents talking to children, trying to encourage them to be kind to others and help them to understand that when you're kind to others, it may be difficult at times, but when you're kind to others, the person you're helping the most is actually yourself. And then when you're bullying others, the person that you're really bullying, the person that you're hurting the most is yourself. Okay, again, just want you to see that these are short little sayings that parents and grandparents would use on their children and grandchildren to try to help them make good decisions so that they live a more complete life and the family is in better shape, better hands. Okay, one more. So let's go to, still in chapter 11, let's go to verse 22. So 11:22, this is one of my favorites. Like a gold ring and a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. Yeah, let me say it one more time. Like a gold ring and a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. Okay, and you can picture mom and dad saying this to their daughter. You know, daughter, like a gold ring and a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. Okay, who's the gold ring? It's that daughter. Okay, and what are they trying to teach her? Does a gold ring belong in a pig's snout? No. So daughter, precious gold ring daughter, don't be where you don't belong. Don't be with people that you don't belong with. Don't engage in activities that you shouldn't be doing, that are somehow going to make you a person without discretion. Okay, so it's just a way for parents to emphasize the value of their daughter. You're gold, you're precious. And so don't make decisions that would put you in company that's not fitting you, that's not befitting of you. And don't make decisions of engaging activities that aren't worthy of you. Okay, a pig's snout is not a worthy place for a gold ring. And so, daughter, don't put yourself in company, in activities, in circles that are not worthy of you. Okay, just trying to empower the daughter to make good decisions so that she's hanging with people and engaging activities that are worthy of her. Okay, and you can think how this would also speak to a son. And it would be kind of a warning to the son. Don't just caught by beauty, look at decision making. And don't just get trapped by, attractiveness, outer attractiveness. Look at the decisions that are being made. You want a wife who is a good decision maker and is not going to be where she doesn't belong. Okay, so again, just wanting you to see all of these, that they're observations about how life tends to work. And if you put these into practice, then odds are that you're going to end up on this upper path with a good life, and that your decisions will be good, and the result of that will be a good, blessed life. And if you don't follow these decisions or this guidance in your decision making, then you're going to end up with a very difficult, likely wrecked life. Proverbs ends with a poem. And so if you turn to chapter 31, you get this poem that concludes Proverbs. And it's 22 verses long. It goes from verse 11 through 31. And maybe that's 21 verses. But from 11 through 31, it's the Hebrew alphabet, and it's an acrostic. And so each verse starts with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And it's celebrating this woman. And oftentimes it's read, it's understood that this is the kind of woman that you're supposed to find to marry. Again, father to sons need to marry wisely. And I've heard this taken as kind of a blueprint, if you will, for women, that teenagers, young women, older women too, this is who you want to be. This is who you want to grow into. So the kind of woman you want to marry or the kind of woman that you want to become. So that's one way it's understood. It's been understood that way by a lot of folk. But there's also kind of a second way to understand it, which I find most attractive. And that is that this is not celebrating a particular woman or saying you need to marry a woman who's like this. This is Lady Wisdom. And so this is all about not simply marrying wisely, but marrying Lady Wisdom. And that if you marry yourself to Lady Wisdom, so that you take her into your life and you're listening to her, what you will discover is that Lady Wisdom provides an excellent life for you. And as you listen to her, you'll discover that your life is good and that it's blessed. And so I'll let you decide how best to take it, but I challenge you to read through it. I think I might have even assigned it as part of our reading. And to just think about Proverbs here being framed, that you got all of these short little Proverbs, take this advice, put this into practice, and you'll make good decisions. But all of that is framed by this father-son speech or father-son speeches to listen to Lady Wisdom, and then concluding it, this poem at the end about Lady Wisdom and about marrying Lady Wisdom, embracing her, being loyal to her, taking her into your life. And what you discover is that she will actually make a way for you. And so all being framed by listen to Lady Wisdom. That's what makes the most sense to me in terms of how to understand it. Okay, so that's Proverbs. And I'm guessing that you're looking at this and you're thinking about this and you're saying, but wait a minute. Life doesn't always work that way. And you're right. You're absolutely right. See, one of the places where we get ourselves into trouble with wisdom, and especially Proverbs type wisdom, is we begin to take it to an extreme to where we turn these observations about how life usually works into absolutes. And once we turn them into absolutes, then we start to reverse the arrows. And so we think if this is absolutely how life always works, then we begin to reverse the arrows and say, okay, whoever is living a good life, a blessed life, they're healthy, they're prospering, their family's in good shape, bringing them honor, well, then obviously they made a lot of good decisions. If they made a lot of good decisions, then they must have obviously put the Lord first in their life. And so they're fearing the Lord, God must be first in their life. And so then not only are they wise, but the assumption is that they are also righteous. And so whoever is prospering, you just simply reverse the arrows, and that's how you know who's righteous. They're living a blessed life. And then the same thing happens down here on the bottom path, that whoever is living a wrecked life, they're sick, they're poor, they're having family problems, well, they've obviously made a lot of bad decisions. And if they made a lot of bad decisions, well, then they must have made the worst decision of all. They must have dissed God. And if they diss God, then not only are they a fool, but then they're also a sinner. And so we end up taking this Proverbs wisdom to an unhealthy extreme. We forget that it's observations about how life usually works, and we've turned it into absolutes, guarantees that this is how life works always. And so then we figure, okay, if somebody is doing well, then they must have God first. And if somebody is doing poorly and their life is really kind of turning into a wreck, then they must have sinned. They must be somehow doing God wrong. God's making them pay. Well, what's the corrective for this? What's the corrective? Book of Job. Job's story is the corrective to Proverbs being taken to an unhealthy extreme. Now, I'm assuming you know the story of Job, that you at least read about the story, if you haven't read it, in Discovering the Old Testament. But the story of Job goes like this. Job is a righteous man. He honors God, and he is God blessed. And his wife, family, farm, just abundance. But everybody knows that Job is upright, he's righteous, and that's why he's so blessed. Well, what happens is that the Satan has been out roaming the earth and shows up in the counsel of the Lord And the Lord says, have you noticed my servant Job, how upright, perfect, godly he is? He's blameless and without fault. And the Satan says, the accuser, the Satan says, well, it's only because you've blessed him so much. He doesn't really fear you. He doesn't really put you in first place in his life. He's just playing a game for himself, that he's just using you to get blessings, that he doesn't really honor you. And the Lord says, no, that's not so. And Satan says, well, let's see about it. So God says, okay, you can strip him of everything but his health. And so he loses everything. And Job will not curse God. Job is faithful to the Lord and still God-fearing, God first. And then Satan comes back and says, okay, but it's basically because you let him keep his health. If you let me destroy his health, then you'll see that he really doesn't fear you. He really doesn't worship you or put you first. God says, I know Job, and he puts me first place, and he'll keep me first place. So go ahead. So Satan strips him of his health. And so Job has lost everything, including his health, and he's lost his children, and his wife tells him, Job, you might as well just curse God and die. And he will not listen to his wife. So he's got these friends. He's got these 3 friends, and they sit with him in his misery, and they all believe this stuff. And so they're saying, Job, man, look at your life. It's a wreck. What did you do to make God so angry at you? How did you sin against God? It's obviously that you've sinned. Look how messed up you are. And Job says he didn't sin, that I haven't dissed God. I've kept God first through everything. And yet this has happened, and it's not right because I've kept God first. And Job's friends keep arguing with him, telling him, no, you had to have sinned. And Job keeps protesting that he didn't sin. And so Job declares his righteousness, that he's kept God first, even though his life has ended up a wreck. And his friends keep telling him, no, you must have sinned. It's obvious that you sinned. And then a 4th guy comes into the picture, and maybe God's trying to teach you something with your suffering. But Job is saying, look, this isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to work. I've kept God first, and yet my life is a wreck. And Job wants to hear from God. He wants an audience with God. And he finally gets it. And God comes to Job and has a whole bunch of questions for Job. It's like, Job, where were you when I was creating? Where were you? Explain to me creation, Job. And I'm really giving you the shorthand version. But Job, if you know so much about how the world is supposed to work, how does it work? Where were you when I was bringing this world into being? All these questions God has for Job, they humble Job. And Job ends up humbling himself before God, no longer demanding answers. He never turned away from God. He never dissed God. Now he's humbling himself before God, realizing that God doesn't have to answer to him, that he is accountable to God. And even more, what Job realizes is that this system, God's wisdom just blows it up. God's justice is bigger than this system. That God's wisdom cannot be reduced down to simply guarantees about how life is going to work. About if you fear God, it's going to be all good. And if you diss God, it's going to be all bad all the time. Job learns that God's wisdom is just too much, too vast, too complex to be reduced to this. And so he humbles himself before God. And then God lifts him back up and God restores him. But the message is that you cannot reduce the wisdom of God to simply these types of guarantees, to proverbs taken to an unhealthy extreme. Now, I don't know why all this exactly happened to Job. If you've done much reading on Job, you learn that there are different views. Was he a real person? Is this more of a literary work? Or Did it historically happen, all this? And how do we know about this conversation between God and the Satan in God's counsel? How do we know all that? So I don't have answers for all that. There are different theories on it. But I think this is the biggest thing that I take away from it. That God is using Job, using this account of Job's life and these conversations, whether we want to say that it's historical, whether we want to say that it's historical, but then it's been developed as literature, or whether we want to say that the whole thing is kind of a story that God gave to somebody. Okay, however we want to work with that, and you can pick and choose how you want to go with that. The big message is that God's wisdom cannot be reduced to this. And so you can't use this to judge whether somebody's righteous or whether somebody's sinful. Can't go by where they're at the end. Have to look at the heart. And so Job serves as a corrective to Proverbs taken to such an unhealthy extreme. Now, I'm sure that many of you are looking at this and you're thinking about Job and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, that's not the only problem. That's not the only problem. Not only does life not always work like this, example Job, not only is God's wisdom more complex than this, example Job, but you're thinking, if this is how it is, what happens to the fool in the end? He dies. What happens to the wise person in the end? They die. So you're telling me that no matter what path I take, in the end, I die. Yeah. See, that's problematic. That if the outcome of whichever path you're walking, you diss God or you fear God, you live a blessed life, you live a wrecked life, the outcome is the same, you die, then what's the point? Well, that's Ecclesiastes. So Ecclesiastes is really wrestling with the whole death issue. And it's all nice and neat that you have these two paths and all of this advice, but in the end, if it doesn't matter because you just die, then who cares? And so Ecclesiastes really wrestles with the death question and how death simply relativizes everything and how we're so temporary. And so if we're so temporary, then how should we live? Does it really matter what path we take? We're here for such a short time. And so the writer of Ecclesiastes explores all this. The teacher explores all this. Some think the teacher is Solomon, others not so sure about that. Again, I don't really care what position you take on that, but the teacher explores life, kind of a cynical wisdom, if you will, and keeps asking the question, what's the point? That everything is so meaningless, everything is so temporary, everything just seems to be so in vain. One of the words that gets used a lot, meaningless, could also have this sense of smoke. And that smoke, it's there, you can see it, and yet it's hard to grasp hold of. And it's kind of illusory. It can be beautiful at times, but it can also be very difficult to see through. And so everything just seems to be smoke. Everything just seems to be so temporary, so meaningless, so hard to grab hold of. And so the writer, the teacher goes through and begins to come to some conclusions as he explores everything, that maybe since we really can't control life, we need to quit trying to control life and recognize that we just can't control everything. So quit trying to control everything. That there are things that happen that are just beyond us. And then also maybe to begin to realize, okay, maybe we should just work at enjoying life best we can. And moderation is advised, but to realize, okay, life is hard, life is challenging, life is beyond our control, but maybe the best thing to do is to kind of take our hands off, quit trying to control everything, and learn to make the most, the best, learn to enjoy what we receive. Then at the end, at the very end, you have this perspective of the author come through. And the author really shifts the question to purpose. What's our purpose? So rather than being so focused on outcome, outcome is death. Rather than being so focused on outcome, focus on purpose. What's our purpose here? And where the author lands is that our purpose is to honor God. That our purpose, God created us, our purpose is to live life honoring God, living in obedience to God. That's what we're here for. And so even though there's so many things we can't control, even though no matter which path you try to live, the outcome is kind of the same, death, yet we have purpose. And our purpose is to live faithful and true to our Maker, to our Creator, and to honor God and to live in obedience to God. And that will be a purposeful life, no matter how short our time might be. Well, speaking of time being short, I think that's it for today. And hope you take this wisdom literature to heart and that you're able to see how it plays off of each other. And so you have Proverbs, basic guidance, instruction, advice in terms of how to make decisions, but needing to remember that you can't push it to an extreme to where you reverse the arrows. And then what helps keep us from pushing it to such an unhealthy extreme? The book of Job and the book of Ecclesiastes. And those two help us keep Proverbs in check so that we can live true to our purpose and recognize that God's wisdom and God's justice is ultimately beyond our comprehension, ultimately beyond, reduction to these two paths taken to an unhealthy extreme. One other thing I'd encourage you to do, I'll send you the link for this as well, or I'll post it. Take a look at the Bible Project on wisdom literature. I think you'll find that very helpful. And then much of what I presented you today, you can also find it in Fee and Stewart, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth, their chapter on wisdom literature. Have a great rest of the day. I'm going to assume that you're watching this on Thursday. And so have a great weekend. And I know you can't quite get out to church, but I hope that you're live streaming church somewhere and that you're also in fellowship with believers. Give someone a call, see how they're doing, and pray together. God bless and have a great weekend.